Yes.
Sir.
Yes, over to you, Bilal.
Uh, Good evening, everyone. So my name is Bilal Shijgar. I am representing marketing team from Santo Pharmaceuticals. Before we start, I would love to bless you with lots of blessings and I really hope that everyone with these respective families are safe and sound. And I'm sure that we will definitely pass these hard times together like we always do. Once again, I welcome all of you for this wonderful initiative to share knowledge. We welcome here our most valuable medical fraternity present with us tonight for our program, and we thank you wholeheartedly to show your gracious presence. This program is one of its kind coming from Centro Pharmaceuticals, and definitely we will have such more events in the near future. So, not taking much time, I will start by introducing Dr. Kalmek with an introduction. So, Dr. Bhalchandra Kalmek is an MBBS MD consulting psychiatrist from Pune. Uh, he's working in rehabilitation and de-addiction center at Pune. So he has been an ex honorable treasurer and secretary of IPS, which is for Pune branch. So he has a experience uh, handling patients in Masina Hospital, Mumbai, in the Department of Psychiatry. Not only that, he has also got an experience in KAME Hospital, Mumbai, again in the Department of Psychiatry, and he has also hold a position of being an advisor for Mental Health Awareness Forum. So not only that, he is actively into clinical practice, but also he is into paper presentations. In he has presented papers in annual national conferences of Indian Psychiatric Society. Uh, so there are two international papers he has published on MDD in Hindu and Asian Journal of Psychiatry. And not only that, he is a hold a position of being a chief editor for book MHCA 2017, which is Together We Can. So, and not only that, sir has also a member of Indian Psychiatric Society, Pune Psychiatric Society, and All India Association of Private Psychiatrists, American Association of Psychiatry, Indian Sexology Association, and charter member of Rotary Club of Addiction Prevention, also founder member of organization. And sir is also active participant in local, zonal, and national level continuous medical CME committee member as an organizing committee member. So, with the brief introduction, I hand over the session to Dr. Kalmek and I welcome you, sir. Over to you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Good evening and welcome you all. Hope you all are healthy and safe in this difficult time of COVID pandemic. Today, we PPA IPS Pune branch are in front of you with another episode of Pulse of Wisdom. Today, we are having interactive sessions on psychiatry as I enjoyed it. And the speaker for today's topic had option of becoming international tennis player, but he followed his gut feeling to become psychiatrist. After becoming a successful private practitioner, he opted to become a teacher in psychiatry. Again, then he had option of becoming international spiritual guru, but he opted to become a family man to enjoy his life on his own terms and conditions. He is none other than our beloved Dr. Madhav Gate, senior psychiatrist from Pune, life coach, mentor to many students and psychiatrists. Today, he will be talking with us about his experiments with psychiatry and how he enjoyed it. To moderate these sessions, we have Dr. Sunil Gowda. Please project his slide. Dr. Sunil Gowda is our friend. He is MBBS from Latur. Then DPM from Nair Hospital, DNB from the National Board of Examination, New Delhi. He has worked in Nair Hospital and RN Cooper Municipal General Hospital, Mumbai. Currently is practicing as consultant psychiatry at Mai Mangeshkar Hospital, Warje, and Nanded Multi-Speciality Hospital, Nanded City. Actively involved in research and has many papers published in his reputed journals. Area of interest are sex and relationship counseling, psychotherapy for depression and anxiety, de-addiction treatment, stress management therapy. He has done various lecture workshops for general public, teachers, senior citizen, student, general practitioner regarding mental health awareness and life. He is a life member of IPS, PPA and IMA Pune branch. Over to you, Sunil. You are please unmute yourself, Sunil. Yeah,
Thank
yeah.
you, Balchandra, for a great introduction. Rather, I will say it's an honor to get an opportunity to talk about, to introduce sir to this forum, Gate sir. As we all know, sir is a teacher. He is a role model. He is a life coach for many of us. Especially एक पूर्ण नवलेची जनरेशन सरांच्या अंडर 7 ते 8 वर्ष डेव्हलप झाली असं मी म्हणेन. So it's a great honor. Can you put sir's introduction? Basically, sir doesn't need any introduction, but for people who doesn't know sir, त्यांच्यासाठी I will read introduction. Dr. Madhav Gate sir, he's having a rich experience in teaching psychiatry for more than 35 years. He's retired as a professor and head of department psychiatry, Naule Medical College in Jan 2019. He was working with Ramanand Home at Karad and was appointed as a, he was working for Remand Home at Karad, and he was appointed as a member of Juvenile Welfare Board by the government of Maharashtra, a post equivalent to a first-class magistrate. He has written many articles on psychiatric and psychological as well as the social subjects for the program Aple Arogya for All India Radio Pune. He has attended the World Conference in Biological Psychiatry, Washington in May 1999. He was the chief coordinator in research project and published many papers in national and international journals. He was a speaker on the role of omega-3 fatty acids in psychiatry at the symposium in the National Science Congress in 2001, at the CME in Pune, BJ Medical College, Pune in Jan 2002. He has represented India in veterans long tennis in the World Championship, age group 55 to 60 at Turkey in October 2008. So basically, this is a very short CV of sir. There are many things we can talk about. Sir he's an extremely enthusiastic person. He has done something very, you can say, paragliding at the age of 62. So many things are there. So this is a short introduction of sir, and now I hand over session to Gate sir.
Okay. Good evening, everybody. And my sincere thanks to Pune Psychiatric Association, the IPS Pune branch, the Centaur Pharma, and Dr. Balchandra, the whole team, for inviting me as a speaker for this webinar. Actually, like Sunil said just now, I have retired as a professor of psychiatry more than 2.5 years ago. So I'm not much into academics nowadays. So I was a bit reluctant. My priority interest nowadays is my own fitness and my lawn tennis, of course. But Dr. Balchandra can be very persistent, very persuasive, and he's also a personal friend. So ultimately, I could not say no and had to say yes and agree for this lecture. So the topic also we discussed among us, and what he suggested, I like that topic. Psychiatry as I enjoyed it. Now, when we decided on this topic, I started thinking, what I have got into, what am I talking about, what will be I talking about, and I realized that yes, I do enjoy not just psychiatry but life in general, and like we do with the patients, that when did your problem start and all that. I started discovering sort of myself. When did I start enjoying all the things? And I realized that it led me to the sports that I took part in school, in college, I played a lot of sports. I played football, I played table tennis, I took part in athletics, I was a water polo captain, and then I played cricket and of course lawn tennis. That at the school level, at the college level, and tennis, of course, at national, international levels. But sports taught me a lot. That's what I realized. Sports, all these sports, not just tennis, but all these sports taught me a lot about life, about how to enjoy it, about they taught me like always go to basics. If there are problems, any problem, you go to the basics and simplify the problem, and you'll find a solution. That's what I learned from all these sports. They also taught me about winning and losing. I realized gradually that winning and losing is not the end of the road. They are just phases, and you have to take them both in your stride. Actually, when I started doing that, I my life became easier, sort of, more enjoyable, because these things, if you react to them, they affect you differently as per your reaction, as you know. Uh, the sports. I'm talking about sports. I'll come to psychiatry later, but sports is my passion, and that's why I'm talking about it. Sports also, taught me dedication, determination, and 110% effort. I went to those World Team Championships in Turkey. Even if I remember the kind of exercise, the huge exercise I used to do that time, right now I feel breathless. How could I do that? I mean, I had to get up at 4:30 because I had to catch a bus at 8 o'clock for Talegaon Medical College, and I did a lot. But all that, because of the love for sports. And also the sports taught me, or I learned about conviction. You have to have conviction to do something good, to do something better, to do your best. You have to be convinced about yourself. I I sort of realized that I applied to psychiatry also. In the sense, I'm convinced, totally convinced in my mind that each and every patient will return back to normal. That is my conviction. I know not all of them come back and not all of them recover. I know that. But the conviction I have in mind is that each and every patient will return back to normal if, you know, I make the effort, if the patient makes the effort, if the relatives make the effort. That doesn't happen many times, but that is my conviction. And that conviction, it sort of goes to the patient and the relatives. It helps a lot. It helps a lot in the treatment because they see that I'm convinced, so why not make some effort? And of course, above all, sports taught me about enjoyment. Enjoying things, big things, little things, even the losses. I, I was playing a match in Pune long back with Shashi Menon. He was a Davis Cup player later on. And the match was placed at the side court. Everybody thought that the match will be over by half an hour. And only one of my friend had come to watch the match. And I won the first set. And suddenly there was such a huge crowd on the court, on the road beside the court. Hare Madhav is playing and he seems to be beating Shashi Menon. I lost that match. But I enjoyed that loss like anything. I still enjoy it because I got the conviction again that I can do something good, something better. I can do my best. And that's all, I learned from sports to enjoy everything, even the studies. I think every child should play some or the other sport so that the studies are also helped. You know, I studied well, I'm sure, because of sports, because of the enjoyment, because of taking everything in stride, because of not giving up. All that helped me in the studies also. So that's what I learned from sports. And it gradually, you know, percolated into life. Like when I was in Karad, uh, I started a school for mentally handicapped children with the help of a couple of parents. And I'm glad to say that it is running well even after 35 years. Now it has grown, started in a single room. But as we all know, you know, working with handicapped children is difficult. Emotionally, it is really difficult. But little things, if you enjoy, there was this girl who was, you know, kind of stocky kind of girl. She was Down syndrome. I still remember her. And she used to be happy while helping to, you know, move the furniture, heavy things and all that. We observed that and we put her for training in weightlifting. You know, she went to the national levels. She almost got into Paralympics. I mean, this is enjoyment from the things that you're doing. You pick something up, you enjoy that, so that the other difficult things become tolerable. That's what I think. Even in the Sunil told you that I was appointed as a member of the juvenile court. I worked with a remand home at Karhad. They have a nice remand home actually. A lot of children there, and their histories, we all know the bleak histories they have, and the problems they have, the problems their families have. But when I started working there, I again noticed that some of the children, some of the kids had wonderful skills, you know, mechanical, some in arts, some in music like thing. We started a workshop and they enjoyed it. And more than that, I also enjoyed it a lot. So this is how it went. And then we come to psychiatry. Shruti, next please. You know, when I joined psychiatry, I tried to start reading psychiatry from our textbooks written by all those foreign authors. And the language in our textbooks, I thought it was horrible in plain words. You know, I start reading a paragraph. The paragraph is mostly one sentence only. Only one sentence, the whole paragraph, a lot of clauses, and some incomprehensible words spurs in between. No, it was like Shashi Tharoor language. That's why I've written. Are we slave to this Tharoor language kind of thing? Tharoor sentences. You know, if you end that paragraph, if you end reading that paragraph, you have to go to the first word again, start again, because you don't know what the writer is saying. There are so many clauses and the sentences are so heavy, the words are difficult. And that's what the language I found in textbooks. What I did was I found a very slim book, a textbook of psychiatry by an Indian author, and I read that. He didn't have any difficult language. He had given it very succinctly, what are the disorder and how everything goes. And I got a comprehensive view at least. Then I, you know, tried to read the bigger textbooks. But the thing is, while reading all this, I started thinking, because like I said, sports taught me to simplify things. I wanted to simplify my thinking in psychiatry. I wanted to simplify psychiatry, to think it in my own words, my own language, my own simple language. So I started doing that, and gradually something came up. You see, I'm more of a clinician. There are clinicians, there are academicians, and there are research people. Some have a lot of abilities of all these three. But I'm basically a clinician. So what I felt that I should be able to understand the patient better, and I should be able to help the patient. So as to do that, I had to think in simple words. I couldn't think in those textbook languages. And ultimately, something came out, an idea crystallized, sort of. And I found that there is only one reason for all the psychological problems that come to us, from minor to major. For all the problems, there is only one reason, one single reason. And what is that? That reason is somebody cannot accept something. That is all. That is all. You can take any patient, leave aside the organic mental disorders and some of the childhood disorders and things like that. But otherwise, from anxiety, from mild depression to bipolar and psychosis, there's only one reason. Somebody cannot accept something. I'll explain that. Shruti, next, please. So what I felt was acceptance is the key. Those who cannot accept something, they get problems. Like accepting yesterday and accepting tomorrow. What is that? There is a movie, animation movie called Kung Fu Panda. I have seen it many times, and I tell about it to many patients and their relatives. There is a sage in that movie. He's a turtle. It's a turtle, actually. And he says that yesterday is history, tomorrow is a mystery, and today is a gift. That is why we call it the present. You know what happens in many persons' lives? They get stuck in yesterday, or they get stuck in tomorrow, and the today is spoiled. The present is spoiled. And of course, then we psychiatrists get paid because they come to us. Like, simple examples. A wife cannot accept that a husband has to go for a fellowship with his friends once in a week or once in 15 days. She cannot accept that, and then there are problems. The husband cannot accept that in spite of the full cupboard that she has, full of clothes, she has to buy a new dress for the party. He cannot accept, and then there are problems. Likewise, mother-in-law, the greatest cause for for creating our patients, probably. But the mother-in-law cannot accept how the daughter-in-law behaves or talks or those things. There are problems. The daughter-in-law doesn't accept the mother-in-law's possession of the kitchen and the son. There are problems. And the son gets sandwiched in between, because mother-in-law wants the grandchildren and the son, but she doesn't accept the daughter-in-law. And she doesn't understand that in the process, she is ruining her own son's life. That is what happens in almost all the houses, almost all the houses. I don't know. I mean, the reasons behind that, we can talk about that later on maybe, but this is what happens. Even a paranoid patient, if you really think about it, he just cannot accept that he is a nobody. And nobody tries to kill or harm a nobody. But he doesn't accept that. And there are problems. Again, we get paid for treating these patients. There's only one simple reason for all the problems, psychological problems that come to us, and that is somebody cannot accept something. Like suppose a patient doesn't accept that he is healthy. What happens? One of my acquaintances, he went for an overnight party. One of his older friends, he got a heart attack during the party. He was admitted. Unfortunately, in 2 or 3 days, that friend died. This fellow's mind started working. Because of the fear, after a couple of weeks, his mind decided that I am not healthy. So he started getting symptoms, chest pain, palpitations, breathlessness. We all know that. He came to me. I said, I'll give you medicines. Your symptoms will come down. but you have to understand what is happening. You have to accept that you are healthy. You see, our medicines can help, they don't end the problem. So I told him, and I admire this patient because, he, even in that anxious state, he listened to me, he digested what I was saying, and then within 15 days, he was back to normal. He pushed himself, got angry on himself, what am I doing? And I said, you are different. That fellow was different. His physics, his problems, his physical state, even his fate, his nasib was different. And what are you doing? There is no logic in saying that because he got a heart attack, I'll get a heart attack. But he understood that. And he came out of that mental mess. That's why I admire such patients. We can only tell those patients what to do, how to do it, but doing is their business. If they do it, yeah, I admire those patients. As a little, serious kind of example, I'll tell you another short story. There was this girl, intelligent young girl, journalism, masters in journalism, working with a big newspaper. Unfortunately, she was an orphan because both her parents had perished in an accident when she was a child. She was raised by her maternal uncle, a very nice family again, very nicely raised, very nicely treated also. She got engaged to a person, a nice boy, with a nice family, with a sister-in-law and all that, but all normal. When she started visiting that boy's house, her future in-laws, suddenly one day she broke into hypomania. Suddenly she started talking too much, became irritable, became almost abusive, became argumentative, and all signs of hypomania. She was brought to me. I gave her medicines and she calmed down. And the next week, when she calmed down, she said, I don't want to take medicines for my whole life. I mean, lifelong. She had read a lot of things about what I said and hypomania and bipolar disorder and everything. And then I said, so what do you want me to do? She said, find out why this has happened. This is a very important question in psychiatry for the patients, for the psychiatrists, everybody. So I said, let's try. I'm no psychoanalyst, but if you have to find reason, we'll have to talk. We'll have to talk a lot. And we started talking. We went on talking once a week or so for a year, more than a year. And suddenly one day, I had this idea. I asked her, are you angry with your parents that they left you? When somebody dies, there is a sad feeling, grief, and all that. No doubt about that. There is anger also. And she also thought about it and she said, yes. I mean, she developed what you people call in difficult words as insight. She understood what had happened with her, what had happened with her emotions. That anger was suppressed for a long time. And when she saw the normal family where she was to go, suddenly the anger burst out. She became hypomanic. Actually, she didn't need any medicines after that. After more than 12 years, if I remember correctly, she's absolutely normal. She had 2 deliveries. She's in the US and well settled with her husband. And a couple of years ago, she rang me up saying that, doctor, was my diagnosis really hypomania, bipolar disorder, hypomania? I said, yes, it was. Why? She said, here the doctors are wondering if how you are without medication, you had 2 pregnancies, deliveries, how can that happen? I said, you are probably the most lucky person in this world. What could I say? There might be, even among the present audience, I know that somebody will say that this is controversial and all that. But what I have experienced is that that patient, she accepted that she was angry with her parents, and and the illness went away. As a small third case, the last case about acceptance, there was this child in the kindergarten. He was brought to me by his mother, and he had refused to go to school refusal. Of course, we know the child psychiatry dictum that the problem almost always lies outside the child. So I dissected the parents, taking history, grandparents, and everybody, and school, and nothing. I could find nothing. So I told that mother to go and visit the school and find out if there is someone or something troubling him. And yes, they had fixed places for lunch, those small kids. And this fellow's place was near the wash basin. Such a simple reason. But because of that place, he refused to go to school. That was changed, and he started going back to school. It's all about acceptance. That's what I feel. Acceptance is the key. Shruti, next slide, please. What happens when there is non-acceptance? Non-acceptance leads to a mechanism called, again, I call it what if mechanism. What is that? If a person doesn't accept that he is healthy, he starts, thinking, what if I get an attack? What if I get this thing? What if I die? Most of the time the fear is about death, but this what if is troublesome. And most of the anxiety is, all of the anxiety almost, is centered around this what if, especially OCD. There you get this what if to a severe extent, because those patients just cannot leave that mechanism. I have had some patients who are quite intelligent, and when we discuss this, along with the past disease, along with all other kinds of treatments, but when they were able to control that what if, they got much better. They are better still, So what if becomes very important in anxiety,
ते काय
especially.
हे असं ठेवलेलं आहे ना त्यांनी, त्याच्यामुळे पसारा होतो.
So anxiety is the core. That's what I feel. Shruti, next slide. We all know anxiety and its ramifications. Anxiety is the core. If it comes out as it is, we get generalized anxiety disorder, like that patient whose friend had a heart attack. Or if it is, suppressed and comes out suddenly, apparently without a reason, we call it panic disorder. I had a patient. She was recently married, and they were both posted in Hong Kong. And she suddenly started getting panic attacks while traveling. Then at home also, her mother went there, but it was of no use. And then she came back to India, and we started talking. She said, I don't want to take medicines. Most of the people nowadays, they go to Google and see the medicines and their side effects and whatnot. And they tell us that I don't want to take medicines. I said, okay, let's talk. We talked a lot. She only said that this is like, washing your linen in public. But I said, there's no other way. We have to find out what is the basic cause. So she was talking about her office. She said it's very difficult. They speak in Chinese. They never let you be friends, and the boss is so and so. I said these are not the reasons which can give rise to panic attack. There must be something else. And then while talking, she told me that even on weekends, they didn't go out much. She was cooking, she was cleaning, she was doing this and she was doing that. I said, I asked her, are you trying to avoid your husband? Initially, she said no, but afterwards, it came out she had a simple problem of dyspareunia, pain during the sexual intercourse. And because of our stupid social and cultural taboos, her mind has completely blocked that out. She was not talking about it to me even after a month. I mean, it came out, she was treated by a gynecologist. She is absolutely fine afterwards, not many years ago. She had children also and all that. But again, acceptance is the key. That's what I feel, because she didn't accept that these kind of problems has to be discussed. It can be solved. You accept something and you solve the problem, and everything becomes, all right, sort of. There was another patient I've written OCD, obsessive PD he was. This fellow was about 30, very intelligent into accounts, and he already had changed 5 or 6 jobs. I said, why? What is happening? He said, I'm very perfectionistic. I do everything absolutely correctly, no mistakes. I said, that's good for work. Then why change jobs? No, I point out the mistakes of my colleagues, bosses who were there and who has made a mistake. I point that out. I said, how can you keep a job then if you behave like this? He was quite intelligent. He said, I haven't married because I can't get along even with my parents. What will I do with my wife? And then, he was so obsessive, so perfectionist. He made me write down everything, what went on the first day. I wrote it down for his satisfaction. But I again admire this patient because he used his perfectionistic attitude for changing himself. He changed those, points where the social relations were getting spoiled. And now he has a big job in a big company again, almost 10 years now. And he married and he has children. But, you have to accept something to be normal. A lot of things, I would say. You have to accept them and then you remain normal. You have a chance of remaining normal. So acceptance is the key. Why? I'm sorry, but I have forgotten to mention in the slides anything about depression. I'll talk a little bit about depression also. What is depression? By my definition, somebody cannot accept some kind of loss. A person, a spouse, or money, or prestige, whatever it is. Somebody cannot accept that loss. A lady came to me last week, I think, a week before that. She has lost her husband 3 months ago. She's in such a deep kind of grief that she's almost cannot perform anything. Profound kind of severe depression. But when I gave her antidepressants, her mood improved a little bit. Then we talked about it, and she also agreed that she has to accept that this is the most final event in life, the death, and she has to accept it. I said, if you want to live further and live normally, then you have to take up your interests, your hobbies, your social relations, your friends. Maybe you have some talents, I don't know. You have to, spend time with that and get busy. If you can, she had some experience working somewhere. So I said, if you can help some people with that, do something, but accept that he's gone. There's no other way. She understood that. Again, she has understood and she is trying to come out. But that's what happens with acceptance. And depression, about depression, my simple thinking again has been that anxiety and depression go hand in hand. Sometimes I see some people giving only tranquilizers for the anxiety patient. I have never done that. I have not given only tranquilizers to a single patient in my life. I always give them antidepressants as well as tranquilizers for a short time. Because in my mind, antidepressants are not just antidepressants, but anti-anxiety also. Why? Because they improve the mood, they improve the confidence, and that is the real key for reducing anxiety. You know, anxiety produces a lot of frustration for these patients. Frustration piles up, there is anger, the anger turns inwards, there is depression. Depression leads to loss of confidence, that leads to anxiety. I mean, the same lady who was doing a lot of things in her house, and suddenly only two people are coming to dinner, and she gets absolutely anxious that she won't be able to do anything. I mean, how can this happen? Because again, she doesn't accept that she is normal, she can do all these things, but there is something, some thoughts, something coming in the way. So anxiety and depression, I have always thought that. And another thing also, you should give only tranquilizers to these patients. We all know that tranquilizers produce this for younger generation, not for the older psychiatrists. I'm just talking in a general way about the simplification that I did for my understanding of psychiatry. So only giving tranquilizers leads to a setback next morning, you know, a rebound kind of little bit of depression, and that piles up, and then they have problems. So I have never given a patient only tranquilizer. I have always given a combination of antidepressant and the tranquilizer as short term as possible. And that is my way of doing it. You know, labeling versus dynamics, that is another of my favorite topic about which I think a lot. I thought a lot. Nowadays, I don't think so much, probably. But we do a lot of labeling. We say that this patient, yeah, in our mind, we have already decided that he is a patient of depression. I'll give him this, this, this. Do we look into the dynamics of why this patient has really arrived in the chair in front of you? You know, why is a very important question, like I said, for the patient and for the psychiatrist also. We do know that our medicines, they only help. They definitely help, but they only help. They don't end the problem. Unless you do something about the dynamics, how can the patient recover completely? I mean, giving medicines is a small part of our repertoire. We all know that. You know, there are, for not looking at the dynamics or not going into the dynamics, there are lots of reasons. You know, many busy people, busy psychiatrists, they don't have time, so much time to do that. There are sometimes financial, you know, the patients can't afford that. There are other lots of other reasons also. But I think that dynamics has the most important, you know, position in the treatment of any patient. I will again tell you an example. I'm sorry, but I have this habit from my teaching experience to give examples all the time. Why I developed that habit, I'll tell you in short. Because in BJ Medical College, when we were doing MBBS, we had psychiatry lectures just after the lunch hour. And our professor never told us any examples. And we just slept for 40 minutes. I said, I won't let this happen. And I started giving a lot of examples so that habit continues. And I'm talking to you, but giving examples. I'm in the habit of doing so. So what happens with dynamics? There was this patient. Uh, he was from a small town on Pune-Nasik road. He had a wife and a kid, and he had a mother who was a widow. He had a younger brother who was an alcoholic, so a lot of problems at home. The mother always supported the younger brother, so there were a lot of quarrels, arguments, fights, and the whole thing was, this fellow was tremendously stressed. Actually, he went into depression, got a lot of physical symptoms, developed a lot of physical symptoms, came to a physician in Pune, and after a few consultations, fortunately, he was sent to me and landed in my clinic. So I talked to him, I asked him about all the history. And I told him that, I can give you medication. Your symptoms will definitely come down. They will reduce. But if you want to really get out of this problem, this stress, this solution, you will have to do what I say. He said, tell me anything. I'll do it. He was a smart guy. He said, I'll do it. I said, accept that you are the head of the family. Accept that you are the head of the family. The buck stops here. You have to solve problems. I said, for that, you will need money. I don't know, but you will have to find a way of earning more. I again admire this patient a lot because he understood what I was saying. He accepted what I told him to accept. He had a job with a wholesaler, and he started his own wholesale business. Started earning much more money, and after a year or a year and a half, he constructed a small chota house for his wife and his kid. They stayed separately. He supported his mother and brother, but from a distance. And everybody became happy. His wife became happy. So the patient became even happier. And the medicines were forgotten. I mean, I think, this is the importance of looking, understanding, and trying to correct the dynamics of why this patient in his lifetime at this point has arrived in a chair before me. I think that is most important. So the why becomes most important for the patient. Patient doesn't know the answer. If we ask him, why do you feel anxious? He doesn't know. We all know that. But we should also ask patients, we should ask ourselves, why? Why this patient is here? What has happened? Why this has happened? Why he is using the defenses that he is using? Or why is he not, finding solutions? There are so many whys, and we have to find the answers to those from talking to the patient. What else? And there is my favorite, kind of thing that I talk with the patients, 10 upon 90. This equation or this principle applies to life. What is 10 upon 90? 10% of things, are in life are sort of inevitable or unavoidable, or you don't have any control over those 10% things. But rest of the 90% of your life is filled with your reactions to those 10% things. How? I had a mother who was into moderate to severe depression. Why? Because her daughter, who was now almost 25, 26, had juvenile diabetes. And this lady was getting worried and depressed so much. Like I said, she was looking at tomorrow, and the today was getting spoiled. Actually, the daughter was quite, adjusted with the diabetes, with taking the care of herself and all that. And she had a good job. She had a good education and good job. So everything was okay from the daughter's side, except the diabetes. But the mother couldn't accept that. Why my child has diabetes? What will happen to her if I am not there? No, she was doing almost nothing. I told her that you're not doing anything much. Your daughter is managing everything on her own. But no, I said, is her diabetes in your control, under your control? Is it, can you control any of that? No, that is inevitable. That is her fate, and she has got diabetes. But instead of finding solutions, instead of helping her, what you're doing is reacting badly to those 10% things. That's what I'm telling you about 10 upon 90. They had given a very nice example of this equation or the principle. A family, young children, school going children, and the parents sitting down for breakfast. The daughter spills coffee on Baba's shirt, father's shirt. The father gets angry. He scolds her like anything, talks a lot. The daughter starts crying. The wife also, of course, she gets upset. And the whole house is upset. And during that chaos, the daughter's school bus is missed. So this fellow irritatingly, goes to leave her to school on his scooter, comes back, goes to his office in the same state. And then after going to the office, he remembers that he has left the bag at home. The whole day is spoiled. Now, his daughter spilling coffee on his shirt, he didn't have any control over that situation, over that action, over that event. But his reaction was such that the whole day was spoiled. If he would have changed his reaction and said that, Beta, aisa nahi karte, while taking coffee, you take care, and gone and changed his shirt, his whole day would have been different. Same thing happens with life. Same thing happens with life. There are people who are reacting to those 10% in a very bad way, and they spoil their today. Again, we come to the same thing. I like that. I teach that to a lot of patients, and a lot of them, to my surprise and enjoyment and happiness, they take up that they digest the equation, they understand the equation, and they accept that those 10 things, maybe they are not so important. I should react to them. Suddenly their life becomes better. Suddenly life becomes easier. Suddenly life becomes almost normal. That equation, I have found it extremely helpful in dealing with so many patients. Like today, yesterday, today, and tomorrow, and acceptance. This 10 upon 90 has also helped me understand a lot of things. I've taught a lot of daughter-in-laws how to deal with the mother-in-laws, a lot of them. But there also, 10 upon 90. You don't have any control over how your mother-in-law behaves, talks, or reacts, or wants possession and all that. But you can react in a different way. The most important thing is your husband, your kids. If they are with you, why is that important? I tell them to use the defense mechanism of humor, ridiculousness. If you understand the ridiculousness in any situation, suddenly the situation gets deflated. Suddenly the stress is less. If I feel that somebody is, not talking properly, I think that it's his problem. The problem suddenly dies down. Why should I react? It's his problem, not mine. And that's what I teach all these people, the patients, the relatives, everybody. Shruti, next slide, please. Yeah. So I have some thoughts about dementia also. I have thought about dementia in my own ways, maybe. Epilepsy, we all know, abnormal firing of neurons. I had this patient when I was in Talegaon Medical College. He had a stroke. And after that, he started behaving abnormally. He had also a lot of memory problems and features of dementia. The medicine people referred him to psychiatry, and I saw him, and I thought, I was thinking along the lines for a few days when I thought that this is also an abnormal firing of neurons, dementia. Because some parts, the neuronal loss is greater. Some of the neurons must be firing abnormally. So I thought of using valproate, divalproate, in a very small dose. Again, in my simple way, I thought that the patients with dementia, their brain must be fragile. It must be vulnerable. So I should not use, large doses at all. I used only 125 milligrams in the morning. I still remember. And I used a small amount of, again, Risperidone, 0.5 milligram at night, with maybe clonazepam 0.25. The patient was not sleeping. And with these small doses, I tell you, almost 80% or more than 80% of my dementia patients with behavior problems have responded very well. Sometimes you have to increase the dose. Some of the patients, a few patients don't respond to all this. They have to be hospitalized and given something else. And yes, there are patients who don't respond to it. But most of the patients, what I mean to say is, respond to this simple and the small amount of dose of valproate and risperidone. I've seen it a lot many times. I mean, one of my friends, she told me that, Madhav, you have done some magic. She was absolutely troubled with her father's behavior because of dementia, behavioral problems. And with this, he suddenly became calm and quiet and could be managed properly. So that's maybe it has been given in the books that you use sodium valproate and all that. I know, but I have used it in this dose and it has worked for me. That is my thinking. Again, simplistic thinking, but it has worked. Another of my favorite point or a favorite thought is positive stress. Are we all right with time? Positive
Yes, sir.
Yes,
Yes, sir.
yes, sir. We
Yes.
can continue, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay. I hope not many people are bored. But positive stress, stress, everybody thinks that stress is negative. Stress is always taken in a negative manner. It's not like that. There is something called as positive stress, and I try to teach the patients and the relatives also about it. What is positive stress? When you do something with pleasure, with motivation, with a drive, you actually face an adverse situation, but even then you feel a lot of energy, a lot of positive feeling, a lot of motivation and force behind you. I'll give you example again. Sorry, but I used to go open the batting for medical college. Me and my partner were always arguing about who should face the first ball, not me. You go there. We were taking that, opening the batting in a negative stress kind of way. And then I saw all these Jayasuryas and Tendulkars and Gilchrist and Sehwags. And I thought that I should have read psychiatry earlier. I mean, I could have, you know, taken it as a positive stress, that ball coming at you with a fast pace, you bash it even more. What a pleasure, yeah. I mean, all these players, they are using positive stress without knowing that. Even I had a patient who was into construction, doing well, but stressed out all the time. I said, you're doing all these things so very well. You have told me a lot of things. You have done that and you're doing this and you're, going for presentations and going abroad. And why are you stressed out? That means you don't enjoy your job. That is the key again. Whatever you're doing, if you're enjoying it, there's no stress. I've seen a lot of patients. I'll come to the Karad OPD. But with all those patients, I never felt stressed. No, because I enjoyed that. For me, again, a simple thought, while I was in MBBS, I realized that I don't like physical mess. That was a very good thought for me, because I realized that surgery and gynec and ortho were out of question. Medicine, okay, but even then the ward is, messy. You can't say it's. And then I landed in psychiatry, and gradually I started liking it. I started liking, you know, unraveling the mental junta sort of. But yes, patients who are who are doing any kind of business, any kind of job, any kind of, you know, self entrepreneurship, they should enjoy all that. And if you teach them, whenever I teach them about positive stress, some of them, again, I enjoy them so much. I feel so happy that they have changed themselves. They have changed their, reaction. Again, 10 upon 90 also comes into play, because whatever the things are happening, whatever uh, frauds are there, whatever, uh, what should I say, money has to be given and all that. Do you have any control over that? No. Then enjoy all these things. Get the work done and enjoy your work. That's what I tell them. And some of them, yes, they almost change their lives with that. Patience, trust, and confidence. You see, my thinking again. When I started practicing in Karad, I thought that patients should trust me. And I should win their confidence. I used to be very frank with patients. I am still very frank with the patients. Whatever the problem, whatever my shortcoming, I tell them frankly. And they start trusting you. You treat them with conviction and with open mind, and they start trusting you. They start having confidence in you, because Karad OPD, as I have written here, it was a busy OPD. Clinic, private clinic, I'm not exaggerating a bit. I had almost 10 patients, 10 new patients every day on an average. My monthly OPD overall must have been around 800,000. Sometimes I didn't get my lunch also. But what do you do? What should I do in this situation? That's what I felt. I learned to understand the patient quickly with my simplistic thinking. I don't go into the jargon of psychiatry, but I understand what he is or she is not accepting and things like that. And I think I can do that easily. Then I have to make the patient and the relative understand that I understand them. How do you do that? Suppose, a lady from a village comes to me and says that she has headache for the last 2 years. And I start taking her history, and she says her husband is in the army. Now this sentence, this small sentence, gives rise to 10 ideas, at least 10 ideas in my mind. That's what we should do. You should have a lot of thoughts about what the patient is saying and what that actually means. She is alone here. She has kids. She has maybe mother-in-laws. She has a farm. She has, to look after everything, everybody's illness and the animals, and also the husband is not here most of the year. Plus, she is anxious about his health, not just health, but his life. Maybe alive or not, she doesn't know. And if I let her know that I know all these problems, suddenly she starts having a lot of confidence in me. And when I ask her, does he drink alcohol? Oh, then the dam opens, because she knows that I know the whole story. I just guess that in the army, alcohol is cheap and easily available. So many of and they have a lot of anxiety, for which tension, for which they drink and start drinking. And then she tells me a lot of things. Yes, he comes home and creates no problem. But by that time, half the work is done. Half the headache is gone probably. And when I tell her that when the husband comes here, get him to me and I'll try to talk to him, she feels even better. And then with medicines, why not? Her headache is gone almost. Then she goes to the village and sends 4 more patients to me. This is the best kind of practice, I feel. I felt that time, But that's how I did my practice, my clinical practice. And I realized that each and every patient has anxiety. Not just those patients who come to us, but those patients who go to the clinic, who go to the hospital for fever, for anything, they have anxiety. They have 10 questions in their mind. And we must anticipate the questions and be empathetic. Reducing that anxiety is our priority. That's what my thinking was. Shruti, next slide, please. Ah, yes, Ramayana and Mahabharata. These 2 epics, they have a lot of things which we can use while counseling the patient. Like the stories of Hanuman and how he was given or how he was cursed by some Rishi Munis, given a sharp sort of, you will forget all your powers. And then his father intervened and they said, okay, when he, meets some guru-like person, he will, make him remember all those powers. And Jambuan did that when somebody had to jump to Sri Lanka, not Sri Lanka, but Lanka. Jambuan said that, come on, wake up, Hanumana, you have all the powers and you can go and come back as many times as you like, and then we know the rest. But what is the relevance to psychiatry? Patient is Hanuman. He has forgotten to use his willpower. The willpower doesn't go anywhere. It gets only suppressed. He has forgotten to use his willpower. He's giving in to those mind games, to anxiety, to depression, to anything. And we are the Jambuan. We should wake them up. We should wake up the Hanuman. And that's why I admire those patients. The Hanuman in them woke up and they started jumping. I am so glad about it. I'm so happy about it. I enjoy these things when these, anecdotes and everything works with the patient, because these things are, for the patient, they are easier to understand. They relate to those stories, and that is very useful. And then this question, I like this question very much. Which is the most frequently prescribed medicine in clinical practice? I have asked this to a lot of medical students, a lot of doctors. I'd gone to Nashik for some university meeting and all that, a big meeting with doctors. I asked it there also. Everywhere I get the answers about aspirin, about B complex, about steroids, about the painkillers, about this. And I tell them that I don't mean any of these. You know, the most frequently prescribed medicine in any kind of clinical practice, not just in psychiatry, any kind of clinical practice, from general practice to super specialties, is the doctor himself. Doctor is a medicine. You can present yourself as a honey flavored syrup. I've seen some physicians, general practitioners, they behave so nicely with the patients. Half of the patients just come to meet them and talk to them. You can present yourself as a neutral capsule. I've seen such doctors also. They don't talk much, they don't react, but they practice and they are successful also. Some of them are like bitter pills. Some of them talk like very rudely and all that. But even then, doctor is a medicine, most frequently prescribed medicine, and the doctor has effects, the doctor has side effects, the doctor has toxic effects, everything. The doctor has a metabolism. One of the doctors told my patients to take some brandy for his bronchial asthma. Now, you tell me if this is a side effect or a toxic effect. That the patient graduated from brandy to whiskey to rum and desi daru and became an alcoholic. What is that? Doctor is the most frequently prescribed medicine in clinical practice, because whatever we talk, whatever we cause acidity. And then I asked him, why did you do that? He said, you only told me 3 years back. Your sentence is gospel for them and they do that. So we should be careful about that. So doctor talks to the patient, not only what you say, but what you don't say is also matters. A paranoid patient, if he comes to the clinic and if you don't say hello immediately, he will think of a couple of things, nasty things about you. Anyway, Shruti, next slide, please. Yeah, I rest my case here, and thank you very much for listening to me. This has been a great opportunity for me to express my thoughts, my simplistic thoughts about psychiatry and myself. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Sir, it is always a great treat to listen you. The words of the wisdom we get from you is absolutely priceless.
Thank you.
Rather, I will say it is definitely most valuable or most informative things we learn from you, which we have not read in textbook during our post-graduation also. One more thing I just want to say, I've seen two extremes in my life. One is the most complicated book in psychiatry, that is, you say Fish Psychopathology. Small book, but very difficult to understand.
Yeah.
And one extreme I have seen Dr. Ghate's Wisdom and Sir's OPD. The way you make the understanding of the psychiatry simpler, easier. That's why I think you are one of the most liked teacher I ever seen. Thank you very much, sir, for informative lectures. If time permits, can we take a few questions which participants asked?
Yes, Sunil. Yes.
I'm sorry if I overstepped.
Sir, there is one question from Ms. Vasudha Joshi.
Okay.
She want to ask, kindly throw some light on the kids' online school and effect on their behavior due to same.
Anyway, you know, what I feel about this is, in short, I think the parents should accept that they don't have any control over the present situation. The online schooling is the thing that the children are going to get. So they have to make arrangements and, you know, keep the children on a tight leash so that they listen properly, study properly, and behave properly. That's all I can say. It's the parents' duty, of course.
There is one more question, sir. It is from Amitwa Ghosh.
Okay.
He want to ask, sir, in current ongoing pandemic, lots of families are getting lots of financial crisis. Some are temporary while some are permanent, especially to some industry where revenue generation is highly affected. The effect directly to the job of employees.
Yeah.
For that now.
Can't hear you.
Am I audible?
Your voice.
Am I audible?
Yeah, now.
Yes, yes.
Okay, sir, this question is little bit longer. I will repeat it again. Mr. Amitwa Ghosh want to ask, in a current ongoing pandemic, lots of families are getting lots of financial crisis, and some are temporary while some are permanent, especially to some industry where revenue generation is highly affected, that affect directly to the job of the employee. For that now a new group of patient population are evolved, mostly middle-aged male, for their coming uncertainty and liabilities. He want to ask how they would accept the yesterday, today, and tomorrow, the concept you told them.
You know, yesterday hopefully was better. Tomorrow we don't know about, but today is accepting today's situation means they have to find some ways of generating an income. That's all I can say, because acceptance is about the situation. The solution is money. You require money. So they have to find a way to generate income somehow. I can't go into details, but yes, that's what I feel. Because unless you earn some more money and become adjustable, the acceptance and everything, you know, any kind of language is not useful at all. Right.
Sir, last question we will take. This question is asked by Dr. Ashturkar. He want to ask, sir, what are those 5 don't we should not do in our practice?
What are those?
Just a minute, sir.
5 don'ts. 5 don'ts we should not do in our practice.
5 don'ts. How can I say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5? I mean, the one thing is, I think, what should I say? Don't prescribe anything, any drug about which you have not studied well. You know, my first and foremost thing is everybody should be very well conversant with the pharmacology of whatever drug you are using. You know, that is so don't use a drug about which you have not studied well. I would say that first. Second is, you know, give the patient some time. However busy you are, give the patient some time. You know, whenever the patient says that, no, I don't have any problem, you give him 5 minutes, him or her, and the problems start coming out. It's that easy. So don't be in a hurry. You know, there was a study and they found out that on an average, you know, all kinds of doctors, from general practitioners, psychiatrists to everybody, they took all the population And the average time spent by a doctor with a patient was less than a minute, which is pathetic. I mean, give them time. So don't be in a hurry. That's what I. Second, don't. Third, don't. Yeah. From my point of view, I would say that think about problems in a simpler way. Go to the core. What is the real problem? Where, in my way, of course, I think about what is not being accepted. That's my way of doing it. But don't, again, don't just label and go on. Don't ignore the dynamics. That's what I say. And and don't, how should I say that? Don't be dishonest with the patient ever. Some relatives tell you that we'll tell him that we are going to a general doctor and we'll bring him to you. No, don't do that ever. That's all, Sunil, I can say. Anything else?
Yeah, Sunil.
Thank you, sir. Now I hand over the session to Dr. Balchandra Kalmek for vote of thanks.
Before that, we have to sum up the session.
Yeah.
Sir, it is very difficult to sum up the session. This was a very nice session, but I will try my best. Sir, you have told us that simplicity is the great virtue of the life. Yesterday is the history, tomorrow is the mystery, and today is the present. So accept it as it is and enjoy the life to the fullest. Acceptance is the key to many problems in the life. This is the key solution to many psychiatric problems. You also told us that apart from medicine, resolving inner conflict is necessary for the remission of the symptoms. You also explain what a phenomenon in a practical manner. Spending more time with patient will definitely help. Finding dynamic of the patient's life is very important. Just don't label and go ahead. This was the takeaway message from your talk. Trusting that my patient will improve and also trusting patient's ability are must for the improvement of the patients. You also explain the 10-90 equation in a simpler way. You also give the insight into behavioral management of dementia patients, use of positive stress, how to develop patient's trust and gain confidence. You also told us to enjoy our practice so that we will not get fatigued. Listening to patients empathetically is the key to successful practice. You give practical tips to develop good rapport, which should be fast with the patients. So all these tips were very practical and useful for our day-to-day life. I thank you, sir, very much. You have really floated us through your rich and useful journey of the psychiatry. It will be helpful to us for day-to-day practice. I also thank Dr. Sunil for moderating this session and also conducting a question answer session. I also thank all the audiences, seniors, colleagues, friends for attending this session in a large presence. Finally, I thank Centaur team, Mr. Anirban, Mr. Mahesh Apar, Mrs. Shruti, Mr. Anupam and Mr. Bilal for their unconditional academic partnership and giving us technical support for this session. Thank you once and all, and I hand over the session to Shruti for her final remarks.
So, I first of all would like to thank IPS Pune branch and TPA for once again showing the faith in us and giving this opportunity to Centaur Pharma to host such huge names of psychiatry world. To thank our speaker for the evening, Dr. Ghate sir, for such an amazing and interesting session. I haven't seen anyone who's so about life and whose passion about life is so infectious for that matter. So he added liveliness and life to our lives today. So it was a really refreshing session. I felt rejuvenated after such a, hard and long day. So I enjoyed it personally, and I'm very sure everyone else also enjoyed it thoroughly. So I thank Dr. Sunil Gowda sir and Dr. Ninad Baste sir. I also thank Dr. Karmik sir, as always, for the smooth flow of all the events. I thank all the medical fraternity and the participants who were present here today. I hope that today's expert session would give you lots of learnings and that will be helpful in your future endeavors. And at Centaur Pharma will always be your trusted scientific partner and keep bringing such amazing programs even in future too. Please keep giving your prescription support to us, as Centaur is India's #1 psychotropic API manufacturer and second largest in the world. And we have brought export quality escitalopram 5, 10, 20 mg tablets to bring back the essence of life in your depressed patients. We also have Isentopam Plus, which is escitalopram 10 mg plus clonazepam 0.5 mg combination tablets. So once again, not taking much of your time, thank you. Once again, I join my hands in gratitude for attending today's session. And this is Shruti Shettigar from Market Pharma signing off for tonight. Take care of yourself and your loved ones. Wishing you all a very good night. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, sir. Thank you. Good night, everybody.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much.